Um, I just found out like about shortly, I mean earlier that this was circulated to our alliance colleague from HLP as well. Actually, this session, when I proposed this, was actually for internal real estate practice. But if you are interested to basically um, participate, please feel free to do so as well. Okay, basically, this session is to highlight some of the best practices or common based on the common errors or um, things that we have been noticing. I think in recent times that has been very persistent in our real estate department as far as the documentation and the problems that we are facing in preparation of documents so far. Okay, Okay, there are a total of eight. I won't take a lot of time, probably about 15 minutes tops. Okay. First and foremost, of course, documentation error. Usually caused by typo versioning. For example, when it comes to bank document versions, you use the wrong version, and I know we always pre-prepare a lot of documents before we even get the bank's letter of instructions, formatting of the documents. Um, I think it's very important that we do a lot of mindfulness session at our real estate department. We do it once in the morning and do it once in the afternoon. But just remember, you need to practice mindfulness when you prepare your documents as well. Always make sure that you are aware of what documents you are preparing. It is very important. Okay, for example, I received some feedback that some of our staffs with some of the projects that has been attaching uh, sale and purchase agreement on land search from another project in another project they're doing. For example, if let's say you're advising something on KL Eco City, you attach a document from a project in Klang. So that is not acceptable, and that is a very fatal error, I must say, especially if you're sending documents to the bank or your developers. Okay. So always be mindful of what you are attaching in your documents. Do not just blindly attach. Okay. Make sure you double check on all these things. Okay. And lawyers, when you notice all these issues, always take corrective measures and monitor until this issue has been rectified and stop recurring. And when it comes to preparing documents, always use a clipboard in your Microsoft Word version. If you are not sure how to use it, check with your lawyers or come to me. Okay, clipboard is like a copy paste function, but you just need to type in certain information once, and then you can paste it all over the documents. Because a lot of the information are repeated throughout all these documents, but you are more prone to error if you type it manually. Okay, use whatever functions that you have on your computer or Microsoft Word. Utilize your technology. And I remember I've taught you all before that on your Microsoft Word, there is a search function on top. If there's something you're not sure whether it exists, just type it there. If you go to Microsoft Word now, go to the top right corner, there is a function, search function there. Just type in clipboard. You will be able to see that function. Paste all your information there and reproduce them throughout all the documents so that you can make sure it's consistent throughout documents. And always remember, you waste more time correcting an error than doing it right at once. So, second problem that we always see happening pretty often is the failure to meet the parties' requirements, developer, bank, authority requirements. It can be as simple as something like initialing on a document using a black ink pen, for example. A black ink pen, for example, there's no basis in law. It's just a requirement of the land officers that a memorandum of transfer needs to be signed in a black gel ink pen. Okay, not ball pen because you'll reject it. Your NRIC, the identification card that you photocopy during the presentation time, it needs to be very clear, okay? And it cannot be cropped, cannot be something you snap with your phone, and you need to make sure that it's clear for purpose of property with title. So this is very important. Another thing will be portal updates. Okay, it's a bank requirement, for example, and one of our developer, for example, IOI, they have their own portal where their management uses it to monitor the cases. So make sure you update these portals in a timely manner, and make sure you attend to the updates as well. So lawyers, it's very important that you give very, very clear written instructions to whoever you're instructing. Okay, because always we realize when there's an issue, it becomes a he says, she says problem. So always put down, for example, I remember Kiki, for example, always have her own way of doing things, and she always put down in writing all the instructions she wants for whoever that is attending to the file that she has prepared. So that is a good practice that she's done. Um, Always make sure clear instructions are given, and if unclear, always ask, because these errors sometimes happen when there is a new staff or a new incoming employee that attends or prepares something, but they are unclear sometimes because perhaps the instruction is not clear, but there's something that you suspect. So always ask. And again, remember, you will waste more time correcting something than doing it right. Okay, this is something I noticed that happens to. I know we process documents in bulk, and it can be very voluminous. So we tend to not carbon copy or CC the relevant parties or purchaser, borrower, or client, bank in some matters. Okay, always remember our SOP is to always copy. I know sometimes certain simple repeated correspondence, or when you rectify a document that has already been sent earlier, you don't want to copy the parties. But for the important ones like bank execution, advice letter, send your CC copies to the relevant parties always. Okay, because this also serves as an update to your clients, purchaser, or borrowers that there is something going on, that we are attending to the changes with respect to the documents. Okay, number four, failure to forward documents for safekeeping. Um, I personally have attended to a lot of inquiries that or troubleshooting of people looking for their documents. Documents were not forwarded for the purchasers or the borrower safekeeping. It's always that when something, our goal is always to just advise for release, because once it's advised for release, no one's going to chase you. So what happens is that we also are we also have our own backlog as far as documentation file closing is concerned. So if we don't attend to a file closing, document or the file sits there for a period of time. And if let's say it takes 1 year for us to close the file will sit there and documents will remain in the file for 1 year. So this is often overlooked. It's important because no one is actually following up with us as far as the document is concerned. Okay, so make sure that the documents is always forwarded, sent for safekeeping. And I know some of the banks, for advice matter, for example, the bank only requires the soft copy. So make sure the hard copy is also forwarded for safekeeping. Uh, Remember, if let's say you don't attend to this, so far you will be wasting time looking for the files. Then, because the files will have been forgotten somewhere, okay, and you need to retrieve these files for purpose of sending the documents to the bank or relevant parties for safekeeping. Okay, company purchasers and borrowers. It's very important. If it's your first time preparing a document for a company client, make sure that there are resolutions, filing the statement of particulars on charge under your Form 34, and to always conduct your company search. Okay. Staff, always remember, be extra careful when it comes to company purchaser or borrower. If unsure, always ask and check with your lawyers that is in charge of the file. Understanding your document. Okay, this is something that I've repeated very often. Always understand the document that you're attending to or preparing. Okay, you may not understand the full content of it, but at least understand the gist of it. Gist of it meaning, for example, you know a sale and purchase agreement is a transaction document. MOT is a form of transfer arising from that is provided by the National Land Code to transfer a property. Okay, the bank security documents, facility agreement is essentially a loan agreement. What's a deed of assignment for? Basically, it's an assignment of security to the bank. What's a power of attorney for? Is to enable the bank to exercise certain rights in the event of default. So always understand these documents. I'm not asking you to read each and every clause of a loan agreement or loan document, but just make sure you understand whatever you're preparing. Because if you understand the document, then you will be able to comprehend the requirement more properly. So if you don't understand, ask. Always ask to understand what you're preparing, what you're doing. Okay, even if it's a simple letter, all the letters are in place not because that it's standard procedure or so on. It's there because there is a requirement, it's necessary for purpose of effecting the complete transfer of a property. Okay, and be mindful of whatever you're handling always. Again, remember, you'll be wasting time correcting it if you don't attend to it right for the first time. Okay, this is also something that I've also picked on. Um, Usually, when a problem happens, staff will realize it first, okay? Or the lawyers may realize it. And sometimes they always attempt to fix a problem they may not fully comprehend. Especially this happens with the staff. So when it is not escalated, time is wasted, okay? Because sometimes someone from the other end, or for example, the bank may ask you to forward or just send over something to tell they give you instruction, tell you, okay, attend to XYZ, and you attend to it and send to you, but realize the problem keeps coming back. So always send it to escalate it to your lawyers or your superior on the onset of the issue. So immediately when there's a first KIV, always escalate it to your superiors first, right? Okay, this is also something that is pretty prevalent during this MCO pandemic. Um, Unable to meet timeline. For subsale matters, one thing that you need to be pay a lot of attention to is always have a clause to um, protect whoever you're acting for. For example, there are multiple processes to be attended to in the subsale sale and purchase agreement, for example. So have a fixed timeline, for example, issuance of letter of undertaking, for the vendor to provide certain documents, have a timeline, perhaps 7 days. If 7 days documents is not provided, then time is extended accordingly until documents is received. Always have an extension clause for all your sale and purchase agreements so that you're not caught. For example, if let's say there's another MCO or there's a lockdown, then at least the parties are protected in this sense. Okay. And again, I know that we have a lot of contracts that exceeded the timeline uh, based on the contracts. So for housing development ones, those saved because we have the COVID Act back then. But then again, there are also a lot of instances where sub-sale especially where timeline unable to be met. So when you notice this, always escalate to your superior immediately on the onset of a possible delay. If you notice that something cannot be met, for example, always escalate. Uh, Even for developer projects, it's still happening right now. For example, one thing that was raised to us would be, for example, CIMB Bank, okay, with a project with IOI. We know that there is a certain requirement or there is a approval on the CIMB Bank side that requires to be gotten, for example, to release the balance money by way of caveat, okay? But a special approval is needed. So meaning that we don't transfer the title of the property first, but bank is agreeable to release the money by way of caveat. So this requires special approval from management of the bank. And if it's not done at the bank's end, then basically everything you do will be in vain, even even if you send in all your documents based on the standard SOP. So from this, we know that there's a possible delay. So escalate it so that we can, your superiors or so on, can at least put things on record to make sure that we do not take on the liability in the event that there's a delay. Okay, remember, again, you will waste time if this is not escalated immediately. Okay, so these are a few of the things that that I wish to share for today. Remember, run through all these things. I think I'll ask Mike to circulate this. Make sure that anytime you meet any of these issues, to take on the action that we have just recommended here. And I think for this year also, I've shared with all the lawyers that what we want to do this year is to improve our process. If, let's say, there is anything that is slowing you down or certain process that you think can be improved, please highlight to myself or your lawyers so that we can tackle it and make changes to whatever SOP that we have in place. Okay. So with this, I end my presentation on this matter. So I take exactly like 15 minutes. Okay, thank you.